Hello, all you lovely humans of the world. Today, we are going to be going through a tutorial about how to write a Where I'm From poem. Now, if you have not really dug in much to the Where I'm From author, her name is George Ella Lyon. And if you go to georgeellalyon.com, you can read all about her story. She is from a small southern town. I believe it was in Kentucky. And she is a writer and she is an educator. And I always think it's really useful to be able to learn about the author before you try to dig into their literature. So if you want to take a little bit of time, you can pause the video at this time and just go through and look through her website, see a little bit more about her and her mission statement and how she got started. If you're going through, she does have some really interesting FAQs. So if you want to learn why she chose to write things the way she has chosen, this is a great place to get started. Another aspect of her website that is really useful is clicking on the section that says Where I'm From. On this section, it goes into the actual Where I'm From project. I think it's interesting that they do have a Facebook page that is dedicated all to this right now. And it says that in response to fear and hate mongering alive in our country today, I have joined Julie Landsman, a writer, teacher, and activist based in Minneapolis, to create the project I Am From through the website, and then they have an actual website for this, and they collect art from around the country that is prompted by that theme. So if you go through this tutorial and you feel like you have a really strong piece of writing, or you want to create some artwork that goes with the Where I'm From project, I really suggest that you go to this website, the iamfromproject.com. Check it out. It is a national movement where they are trying to promote diversity and understanding different voices. And part of her mission statement that I really enjoyed when I was looking through this website was when she states, I hope you won't stop there though. Besides being a poem in its own right, Where I'm From can be a map for a lot of other writing journeys. Here are some things I've thought of. And when she goes through what you can use the Where I'm From poem for, it really hits on why a lot of English teachers choose to use this as a beginning of the year activity. So it really does help enhance your writing skills when you are using descriptive details, when you have to write any type of descriptive writing, when you're writing about a scene or a memory. And it helps you really dig into your family's history or the history of the people that you consider to be your family. So keep in mind all of this information as we begin this tutorial. The last piece about this website that I wanted to let you know is that if you want to hear George Ella Lyon's original poem being read by the author, you can click on her website and it will open up to an actual reading of her reading her poem out loud to you. And that is really useful if you're trying to dig in on her poem, being able to hear the author and her voice as she's going through the tone for each of these sections and each stanza of the poem. So a couple common words that we're going to be using in this tutorial. A stanza is going to be a section of words that are chunked together. So for example, this right here would be the first stanza of George Ella Lyon's Where I'm From poem. Figurative language is something that does not mean what is literally stated. So, for example, we do have a simile at the beginning in the first stanza where she says, I am from the dirt under the back porch, black, glistening. It tasted like beets. So she's using this simile to really enhance the reader's understanding of this childhood memory. So if you think about how she has worded this, it makes you think kind of the perspective of a child. Children would climb underneath the porch. That might be a good hiding spot for them. And kids actually do sometimes tend to eat dirt. So her saying it tasted like beets, that kind of pushes you into that specific memory. Looking down into the very last stanza, when she says, "Under my bed was a dress box spilling old pictures, a sift of lost faces to drift beneath my dreams." So, if you think about a sift is what gold miners would use when they were trying to find pieces of gold in a river. And so they would sift back and forth, and a lot of the rocks would be separated, and they would be able to find the pieces of gold. And she's kind of saying that this dress box is the sift of her memories, and she's able to kind of shuffle through all of the memories that she has. And the ones that are held in the pictures are the ones that she's able to still recall and pull out because she's able to see those faces again. Whereas a lot of the other ones just drift away because time has passed. So, as you are writing, please try to include those types of figurative language. We've also got sayings that you'll want to include. So, you're going to really start thinking about your personal life and where you are in your life. So, you're going to have to pause and reflect as we're going through each of these stanzas. So, to get us started today, I'm going to go ahead and open up my Google Docs, and I am going to create a blank document. And I will be titling my blank document with my last name. And then I'm sure your teacher is going to want you to label this, if you're doing it as a class project, with your last name and then your class period. So let's just say I'm doing this for my first period. So I would put J for Miss J, and then I would put first period. And then I'm going to just do a little dash and say where I'm from. And I'm going to just abbreviate that, where I'm from poem. And I'm not going to create a title yet because I like to create my title after I have gone through and really created my poem to see what kind of tone I'm going to have. But I am going to go ahead and set up my formatting. So I know that I want to do this in 12 point, and I'm going to switch it to Times New Roman because that is going to be what you typically are going to write your English projects in. And I also want to make sure that I'm going to set up um, my spacing. So I've got Times New Roman set up. I've gone to my font size right up here, and I have set it up for 12-point font. Then if you go to the little arrows over here, it's going to say line and paragraph spacing. I have it set for 1.15. I'm going to change that to single. So I want this to be single spaced. I'm not going to do any fancy writing, any fancy fonts. I want it all to be basic, and I want my words to send the message that I'm trying to say. And I'm also going to do this because it is a poem. It is going to be aligned to the left side as I am typing. So I'm going to go over here to where you're able to set up your alignment. I'm going to click on the down arrow here and make sure that it is on left align. Okay, now that we have our formatting, I am ready to go ahead and get started working on my first stanza. For my template, it says I am from specific ordinary item and from product names. And in Lion's poem, I know that her first part starts with I'm from clothespins, from Clorox and carbon tetrachloride. So I know for her specific products and product names, she's kind of zooming in on her time period and kind of how she would have washed clothes and the different chemicals that would have been used. And clearly, when she's saying clothespins, we know that it is hanging up on a clothesline for her to be doing her laundry. So we know that that kind of dates where this poem is taking place and probably our time period as well. So we already know that she's from a southern area, and we know that this was probably written quite a while ago. I know that she said that the first part of this project took place in 1986, where she was responding to another writer's request. So we know that she wrote this around that time period. So when she's talking about her childhood, it kind of gives us a gauge on that. So when I'm thinking about my specific ordinary item and my two products, I want to think about my home. What is my home life like? What items do I feel kind of stand out to me when I close my eyes and I think about one of my most enjoyable places or one of my favorite memories within my home? So, as I'm starting writing, I'm just going to go ahead and write each of those sentence starters to kind of give me a place to get started with each line. And I'm going to go ahead and bold those so that I know that that is the start of each line and where I'm going to add into from my template. Now, I am going to just be starting this with kind of my basic thoughts right now. So, because I am writing this in a post COVID world, I think I am going to start with the thoughts about how the world has kind of changed since COVID. And so, I'm going to go with I am from discarded face masks, littering the fears of our society. And for my next line, it says from and blank. And so I am going to start thinking about what other pieces would I want to include. So I know I wanted to go with kind of the COVID idea, talking about how society has kind of changed. So for my two product names, I think I'm going to kind of keep with that a little bit. So I'm from discarded face masks, littering the fears of our society. From cleaning sprays, and let's see here. I want something that's going to have something I can build up inner imagery on. And wiping down dirty desks between every class. So I'm a teacher, so I'm kind of still going to go with that theme about having kind of the fear of COVID and how this has kind of been transforming our world. And then as I'm writing, I'm just kind of putting down the basics first, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to edit this. I'm going to add more imagery. I'm going to think about what type of cleaning sprays do I want to use? How can I make this stronger? Like right up here where it says littering the fears of our society, I'd want to be more specific with what is getting littered. So littering maybe our minds with and then try to think about my specific word choice. And if I wanted to make this even stronger, I could say, because I've said littering our minds. So these discarded masks aren't literal litter. But if I wanted to make this even stronger, I could think about these fears and I could kind of turn them into some kind of monster and kind of go with a metaphor or a simile. Now, keep in mind, I am only modeling the basics on this template, but I will try to post at the end my finished product and you can see how I keep altering it. So for my next part, where I am jumping into the next I am from line, I want to really focus on the specific items and products that are going to really make me think about my home description. And since I'm kind of going with that whole post-COVID ideology, I'm going to start my next line with kind of the thoughts about that. I am from the worn in living rooms, a host to online work access, in home childcare, and way too many hours spent on Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus. So for this, I was going with specific pieces that I remember from the time period I am focusing on. So keep in mind, your Where I'm From poem is something that could change every year that you wanted to write this. Be my home description has become so many different things because I was kind of based out of it whenever we had virtual learning. And so that's kind of what I'm zooming in on lightly here. So I'm from the worn in living room that became a host to online work access, in home childcare, and way too many hours spent on Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus. And again, whenever I go back and I edit this, because this is just my rough draft, this is me walking you through the template. I know that I'm going to want to take some of these things, like when I'm saying way too many hours, and I'm going to want to take it from being just super basic to being more complex. I'm going to want to try to focus on specific moments. I'm going to want to try to speed up time or slow down time and really focus on incorporating all of that figurative language and those techniques that we're practicing in our ELA classrooms. So, as you're going through this, you're probably also going to be thinking about how you want to break up your stanzas. So, for me, I think that this would be a good place for me to kind of break my first stanza. I am going to go back and I'm going to develop this first stanza a lot more in the future by adding more descriptive details. But to show that my line break is happening, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. I'm going to take away the extra spaces that I have between here so that it all comes together as one first stanza. And for this one, I'm kind of going into nature a bit more. So plants, flowers, natural items, and then really describing those in depth. So when I'm thinking about this, I'm going to want to think about the home that I live in. Around my home, what type of items are there? Do I live in an apartment? Am I in a condo? Am I living in a multiple family home? And if I don't have any wildlife around me, so for example, my house, I have a fenced in yard. And there's a very interesting story behind the reason why my yard is fenced in. So, those would be the items that I would want to include in the part that is focusing on natural items. So, for example, for me, I probably would talk about my fence and I'd probably want to talk about my puppies. So, I currently have three beautiful puppies, and my fence is to make sure that my puppies are safe and secure. When I first moved into this house, I had a puppy that escaped my house, and we did not have a fence up. And a truck actually sped up in front of my neighbors to hit my sweet little baby red pit bull. And because of that and that specific story, my fence would be one of the most important items in nature that I would want to focus on. So that's kind of where I would take this next stanza. Now, I'm not going to continue line for line filling it out, but I will show you my final product once I am done. I'm going to just keep going through the rest of these and going over what each part means. On the next section, after I've gone through the natural items, so here I would have kind of described my home and I would have gone in depth into my home and really tried to focus on slowing down a moment for this because I feel like nature is a good place to slow down a moment. And for slowing down a moment, I could do that by zooming in on that one specific memory and giving as much detail and as much imagery as I can on that one specific moment. And I'll kind of show you what I mean by that when I've finished my rough draft. Moving on to the next section, this is also where I would make a separate stanza. So when you're looking at this and you have this broken apart, my first section, that's kind of my introduction to my time period, what's going on. My second section, and I'm going to just label this nature. That's going to be how I'd break apart my second section. So it's either nature or culture of home. And then my third stanza is where I'm going to start digging into my family and my home life. If you're one of those people who happens to be raised from a specific type of family. So, if you don't know the terminology, a nuclear family is where you have a mother, a father, and then your kids in one little grouping. If you have a different type of family, if you have a blended family where you have stepmother, stepfather, any type of family that you want to include on here, if you happen to be living with a foster family, if you have an adopted family, you can focus on whatever pieces of your traditions that you feel help make you who you are today. Your family is who you feel connected to. It can be your friends if you wanted to talk about your friends when you're going into these family traditions and family traits. So, for family traditions, for me, we have barbecues, we have, watching football games on Thanksgiving, you have the Macy's Day Parade on New Year's, large Christmas gatherings where everyone has to open presents, one present at a time. All of those items would be considered family traditions. Do you put up your Christmas tree? Do you light your Hanukkah candles? Like, you have to think about which traditions you want to include. Does your family like to connect to nature? Do you go on long hikes? Are you kayakers? Do you like to swim? Does your family just like to veg out in front of the TV and talk about your favorite shows that you've been watching? All of this would be tied into your family traditions and your family tendencies. What do you guys tend to do together? What do you tend to have in common? It's the same thing for your family traits. Do you guys all have blonde hair and blue eyes? That would be me and my immediate family. I have a lot of people with blonde hair and blue eyes. But my family traits, if I'm thinking about my kids and my personal family, none of them have blonde hair and blue eyes. So they all have sandy blonde and light honey brown eyes. And you want to be as descriptive as possible on any of these commonalities that you're including. So, this whole section about family, I would kind of put together as one large chunk. So, this would be my next stanza. Option here. You can either make this one stanza and then start this as another, or you can include all of this because it still goes into like family ancestry and more about family and specific stories in your family. So I personally would probably break it on my own. Right about here, where it says something you were told as a child. So, for example, in her model, she says perk up and pipe down. So, that's kind of an oxymoron where you have two opposites together. So, someone telling you to perk up, they're asking you to be more lively. And someone telling you to pipe down, they're asking you to be more quiet. So, when she's saying that, she's kind of separating all of the contradictions that adults kind of put on children and how children have to learn to navigate the world based on what people are telling them and what they want to absorb. So, for me, I would include, as you see she has here, I would include this whole section that focuses on family tendencies, family traits. I would make that one section. Then I would probably start with the different sayings and the different cultural beliefs as my second grouping in this long section. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of break apart where that would go. So I've got one I'm from, another I'm from, and then the from perk up and pipe down, and then another I'm from. So I'm going to go ahead and just put those. And then here is where I'm going to have my sayings. All right. So then it kind of goes in the same format. So I'm from, the, from, going over what each section on this template means. So now that I've focused on those family tendencies, so the things that my family happens to have in common, we all tend to recap on our day at the end of the day. I've really started the practice of mindfulness with my kids and trying to practice gratitude and trying to practice positivity. So I know you guys all go with push and pee. I always wake up in the mornings, and on our way to school, I go over with my kids. I am smart, I am strong, and I have them repeat after me. So those would kind of be tendencies that I would want to pull out for this section. As I'm moving on into the different things that children are told, I know you guys have a lot of things that you are told as children if you're focusing on that. So you could go with like, do as I say, not as I do. Any of those old cliches or those old sayings that you've just heard a million times and they've really become ingrained upon your skull. And then moving into the section about religion, you can go with a representation of religion or a lack of religion. Or this is a really good place to just tie in your culture. So if you don't want to talk about religion at all, you don't have to. You can go with the Xbox One video game console with everything electronic, no drive for a disc. You can go with any piece that you feel is the most important in representing who you are in the moments you are focusing on. So, looking at her model, this is where she goes into, He restoreth my soul with a cotton ball lamb. In 10 verses, I can say myself. When you're thinking about this section, she is alluding to Christianity and she's alluding to Sunday school. And she's probably alluding to that very traditional Southern Christian Sunday school. And if you have been raised in the South, you probably know a lot about what her allusions are referring to because there are so many churches. That is why it is called the Bible Belt. So when you're in this section, if you don't want to focus on religion, don't focus on religion. You can literally add any section of your life that you want to be a focal point in your overall theme. So keep in mind, theme means what you are trying to teach the reader. What do you want to impress upon the person or people who will be reading this? If you're going to be performing it, what do you want your audience to understand? So that's what I would include in this next little section. When you're working on this stanza, really sit and think, really brainstorm before you write it all down. So, as you are going through this section, I would be thinking about those sayings that are heard repeatedly, any religion, lack thereof, cultural aspects that you find important. This is also a really good place to include some more imagery, and you could include stories about favorite meals. So I'm going to put favorite foods. And if you have a favorite restaurant that you guys go to, if you have, I mean, you could even go with disgusting foods. It doesn't all have to be good. You could go with the story about the time you saw your bestie eating chicken noodle soup and they happened to have a noodle come out their nose, or the time someone drank milk and they laughed so hard that milk came out of their eyeballs. You don't have to focus on one specific piece in any of these stanzas. You can go with an overall idea that you want to develop further. Remember, we're focusing on specific moments, slowing down and speeding up. And once again, after I have finished my rough draft, I will show you what that looks like. But I'm just going to finish reviewing the rest of the outline so that you guys know how to wrap everything up. So far, I'm about to move down into my fifth stanza is going to be where I'm going to wrap everything up. So when I go down to my last little section, start this with a specific family story about a specific person. So in hers, she talks about her seeing someone who had to put their hand over their eye to be able to keep the vision in the other eye. So think about a story that you've always found funny, that you've heard repeated over and over again, or a story that whenever you're with all of your friends, that's the story that you want to tell them about something that you have heard a lot or something that is really just super humorous. And then to kind of wrap everything up, so it's up to you on if you want to include the story in your ending or you want to include it in the little section about culture. Which people in your family are the most influential to you? Which people do you feel have helped mold you into the person you are now? And where do you keep up with all of those memories? Are they just all stored within your brain? Or do you happen to have a ton of pictures that are jumbled on your fridge on magnets? Does your mom or your auntie keep up with everything in some sort of electronic archive? So, do they have all of these Facebook posts with pictures that'll never be deleted? Your last section is where you're going to describe where all of these memories are kind of being stored. So here's kind of what my final formatting and the start of my rough draft would look like. I have my first stanza kind of broken apart here where I have modeled. I've got my second stanza, which focuses on nature, culture, description of my home. My third stanza, which is going to focus on my family life, our family tendencies, what we like to do together, aspects we enjoy about each other, or aspects we can't stand about each other. I hate the fact that my kids fight like cats and dogs. That would be something I would put in here. That is one of their tendencies. Siblings tend to fight a lot. My fourth stanza, I would go into all of the sayings that I have heard repeated over and over and over again, any type of cultural aspects I want to include. And then I'm very food motivated, so I personally would want to include some kind of story about food. And then finally, my last stanza, that's where I'm going to wrap everything up. And it's always good to wrap things up with a nice anecdote. An anecdote is when you tell a personal story to help your readers relate to what you are talking about. So that's where I would talk about a specific family member and something that they did that I feel is super important. And then finally, where do you store all of your memories? Do you have some kind of archive? Where is everything kept? Where can you look back on all of these pieces that we have just talked about in our poem? After you have finished your fifth and final stanza, think about the overall theme and emotion you are trying to kind of push out to your audience, and then come up with your title. You're going to hit enter before your first stanza, and then you're going to want to put your title on that very first line. Once you're done, go back, have at least 3 people read your poem, exchange your poem, have them highlight one place that they feel you can be more descriptive. Have them highlight one place they feel you could add some more figurative language. Have them highlight one place that you could add some more slowing down and speeding up on a moment. And please keep in mind that all of these practices are going to greatly improve the type of writer you are going to become. So the more you practice writing, the stronger you will be. I will post my final draft of this poem after I get it all written out, but you can go back to my YouTube channel and see another example of a previous Where I'm From poem that I have posted in the past. So if you want to see another example, it is called The Faces of My Favorite Memories, an original poem. I will include a link to that in the comments, and I will also try to break apart where each stanza is separated in my comments and my description. That way, if you're just struggling with one specific stanza, you're able to go there. If you have a good experience with this, please give me feedback. If you have any way I could improve upon this video for future reference, or any parts that you feel you would like further explanation on, please just leave me comments and I am happy to expand upon anything I have gone over. Thank you so much for joining today. Have a wonderful day.
Miss J Story Faves. Miss J Story Faves.
Miss J Story Faves.
Subscribe now.
And like.